let them know, player. You know, we all got a past. If you here, you in the present. You need to be tripping off your future, dog.
I was raised playing with the clips, but I ain't talking no malice or Pusha T. I was raised fire with the wrist, taking risks. I used to push heck a tree, but them Grammys ain't come with no melodies.
Yo, it's your bro True Juke tapping in with y'all. Look, I got another video for y'all, and I just want to highlight some of these recent developments that's been going on right now in the news and the media. They more like recent distractions, honestly. But the reason I talk about these things, honestly, real talk, is to bring light to the truth and to bring light to present prophecy. As prophecy unfolds and as prophecy begins to take its hold or take hold throughout all of the earth right now, there's a big upswing in distractionary media, distractionary topics, you know what I'm saying? And I could talk about these things and just harp on the distractions themselves, but I like to highlight certain elements that give power to the distraction so that we can see the viability of the prophecy. Okay, right now, regardless of what branch or denomination or religious background you have, I think if you come from any house or branch of religion right now, you could see that there's definitely something going on in the land, right? There's definitely something that's taking place that's greater than what the media is allowed to put forward. Right now on the earth, we're dealing with this Monkey Pox epidemic, they're wanting to call it now. And this Monkey Pox epidemic, there's some elements to the narrative that I'm just not rocking with, I don't feel. But when the media tells us one thing, we can look at that one thing that they're telling us, and then we could also focus, when our eyes are open, we could focus on those things that they're not telling us as well. Because if they're telling us one thing, that means what they're not telling us can be just as valid, if not more valid. So what do I mean by that? Well, the monkeypox epidemic, as they're calling it, has its highest numbers, ironically, in the United States at around 6,600. Okay, around almost 7K of the cases are being described as from the United States. Worldwide, 83 countries have allegedly been affected by this pandemic or this endemic or whatever you would like to call it, whatever the media is trying to call it in order to do another so-called COVID-19 spread of some sort of eventual vaccine for this thing, right? But 83 countries are now experiencing monkeypox in some form, with 76 of the countries not having any signs of it before, okay? Now, 76, have never seen these types of levels or have ever seen it, okay? Now, 26,000 people worldwide are alleged to have been experiencing this monkeypox, and they're likening the monkeypox to AIDS and HIV. They claim that it originates in Africa, and I hate when they do that, because those of us whose eyes are closed immediately want to blame Mama Africa for the ills of the world when it comes to these sorts of plandemics and these sorts of endemics, or like I said, whatever the media wants to call it. They never give a direct location within Africa where these things take place, and normally, once they do identify these things as being from Africa in a centralized location, they always target West Africa, okay? Now, the issue that I have with this is we've seen this before. If you are 80s baby, raised in the 80s, raised in the 90s, you will remember the HIV/AIDS virus that supposedly began in Africa due to a monkey, due to having relations with monkeys, right? And it was only later, throughout the 90s and through the early 2000s, on through the 2000s, when we began to realize and find information and intel that no, AIDS did not originate in Africa from a natural perspective, but AIDS originated in a lab. HIV originated in a lab, and just like they created the virus, they had a cure for the virus the whole time. But they want to paint this picture and this narrative of Africa, especially West Africa, for some reason, right? And we're seeing the same thing with monkeypox. Then in the 80s, they blamed it on gay men, Okay, they blamed it on gay men having relations and spreading the monkeypox, or excuse me, the HIV/AIDS virus through sexual relations that had to do with gay activity. Now we're seeing the same thing with monkeypox, where out of the 6,600 or so cases in America, most of them are being registered by gay men having skin-to-skin contact with one another. And so what I look at this is this. We can take this a couple ways. Yeah, there is a distraction being had right now throughout the land, and the distractions are many in order to keep us from focusing on the spiritual side of things. Now, what are the spiritual side of things? It's really time to look into the ancient prophecies, into the ancient teachings, into the ancient scholarship that has a lot to do with futuristic times, and those futuristic times being what we're living in right now. Our hearts have gotten so numb and so cold, and our minds have gotten so detached from the truth and from the stories and the teachings of our forefathers and foremothers, that now we are numb to these things, and we feel as though none of them are viable to pay attention to. We feel as though none of them are viable to really latch on to as a solution or as a basis for an eventual solution that will help us through these times. Instead, we're going with the fear mongering and the, like I said, these false narratives, or these falsely attributed narratives that are being created by the media, right? So what we have to do is really keep our thinking caps on. Now, when I look at the idea that 6,600 cases, which is the highest in the world right now, as coming from the U.S. in regards to monkeypox, are being prevalent right now and being shared within the media's narrative of this thing, I take a look at the other fact that they're also sharing this idea that it's coming primarily from gay men. But what I have to say about this is, how did it spread to the Americas, or to North America, and why is it that it allegedly came from Africa, who registered the lowest numbers of COVID-19? Okay, so we see this pandemic in COVID-19. We see Bill Gates and his organizations desperately seeking to vaccinate all of our brothers and sisters in Africa. And when Africa had the absolute lowest numbers of COVID. And what was revealed to Bill Gates and his organizations was that while they were creating COVID-19, they were unable to produce a virus that could affect the blood and the bloodline of the global population of Africans. Okay? Now, when I think about this attack, I think about the reality of the narrative that they would have liked to create, in that they needed to go in at a high rate and begin vaccinating millions and millions of people in Africa. Now, many people did fall for the okie doke in Africa. Many governments in Africa, unfortunately, fell for the foreign relations narrative concerning COVID-19, but many African nations stood strong and denied the vaccinations access into African countries, which we need to take our hats off and give them a round of applause. But now, because we knew COVID-19 wasn't created in Africa, the perpetrators of that virus had a difficult time pinpointing it to Africa. Remember, it all began in a lab in the Chinese territories in Wuhan. And so now this new pandemic, or this new endemic, as in the form of monkeypox, is alleged to come from Africa. Okay, and they're pinpointing this in Africa because now they want to revamp their vaccination protocol in Africa, and they also want to revamp vaccination protocol in the States and around the world for those who did not receive vaccinations at first. So we all knew in the conscious and the woke communities and those communities that are spiritually adept that if they were unsuccessful with the pandemic, that they would relaunch another attempt at getting all of us vaccinated. And these sorts of pandemic, these sorts of viral infections going around the world would not stop. Anybody even familiar with the Illuminati card deck would tell you that these things were planned way ahead of time. And as always, there's a financial gain to be had with these things. These viruses are created in the lab. They're owned by multiple organizations, corporations, and the cures for these viruses are owned by multiple organizations and corporations. Bill Gates Corporation being the head of these things, okay? So we have to really look at this in a very concerted way. Now, when I see the targeting of the gay men being the reason why this thing is propagating in the form of monkeypox, I remember the narrative in the Bible speaking about Sodom and Gomorrah. And You know, I like to use the Bible because even though we feel, many of us feel some sort of way about the Bible, the reality is many of us just have been removed from the keys of how to read this very esoteric book. And when we look at the spiritual aspect of what the Bible is telling us, it's easy for me to see that, yes, the world is heating up. And it was prophesied that the world would go by fire next time, right? Or the people, the civilizations of the world would be removed by heat, extreme heat and fire. Then, when I think about Sodom and Gomorrah being sexually deviant, and when I think of Sodom and Gomorrah being written in high crime and criminal activity, when I think of Sodom and Gomorrah being a place where men and women love was taking place like that, you know, and needing to be destroyed because it went against the natural harmony and universal creation, and what that effect was causing throughout the rest of the land, I see the same thing right now. So I find it very interesting that at the same time monkeypox is beginning to be prevalent again through the alleged spread from gay men, the world is also heating up. Okay, the world is also cleansing itself at the same time that this monkeypox pandemic is beginning to ramp up. And once again, the monkeypox pandemic, according to the media, has everything to do mostly with gay men touching gay men, which also makes me wonder, how is this, if it's through gay men that the monkeypox is allegedly propagating itself, how is it that others who are not gay or homosexual going to be affected by this if it's done by touch to touch? Okay, so these are something that I want y'all to think about, okay? So look, it's your brother True Jew tapping in with y'all. Thank you for your time as always. You know I love you to life. Continue to stay blessed. Continue to stay vigilant. Most High Mama and Papa willing, I'll be back with another one. But until then, y'all stay cool. Gone.
True Jew, here to spit his rhyme. True Jew, here to speak his mind. True Jew, ain't in here lying. True Jew, keep it too real, they claiming it's a crime.